Morning, and I'm very pleased to be here again today for this, our 27th broadcast of the early morning show. And today we're going to be doing the third part on the topic of consultative selling. This is one of the more sophisticated and challenging areas of legal business development. Actually, as I've mentioned before, I wouldn't even limit this to legal services. Consultative selling would work across all of the professional services. So if you're an expert in tax, in audit, consulting, grants and incentives, these other areas, especially in the big four, then knowing and applying consultative selling could be a very useful and beneficial activity for you to do. As always, we know that the early morning show, we have this every Thursday morning. Now it's in the shorter format, just half an hour. I think that's more than enough. Every Thursday morning, 8:30 to 9 o'clock. Where I present 16 key concepts on professional services business development. Separately, we have different interviews, which I will do on an ad hoc, sporadic basis. Sometimes I can position these immediately after this broadcast. Other times they will just be recorded and put onto the Nixedonia YouTube channel. Actually, by the way, guys, I'm thinking, if you haven't checked out the Nixedonia YouTube channel, you should. There are now literally dozens of Nixedonia shorts, these 2 to 3 minute videos on the best sales concepts. And then we have, my goodness, at least a couple of dozen of these 30-minute to 60-minute legal sales lectures. So in terms of content, there's more than enough online to keep you busy if you're interested in this kind of thing. And at the same time, you can always drop me an email to jjmcveigh@nixedonia.com if you'd like any of the different papers and handouts and presentations and materials on these different topics. And I've written something like more than 25, 26 different legal textbooks on business development in the various areas. So yeah, there's a lot of different material if you're keen. So today we continue with consultative selling. And 2 weeks ago, we had the first session on consultative selling, where we explained basically what consultative selling is. Consultative selling is when you have a potential client consultation or client consultation, and you ask open questions in a specific order in order to identify the needs of that prospect or client, and then to bring the implicit needs, the explicit needs, to make the implicit needs into explicit needs, and to decrease price sensitivity. Consultative selling is an approach of open-ended questioning to identify the different needs. And this is different from linear selling or simple selling, as I would call it. To be honest, consultative selling would be a massive competitive advantage for most legal practices. But like I mentioned before, most legal practices have no methodology for client consultations. And what they're doing is basically a black box approach. A partner or a lawyer from the practice, they speak to a prospect or a client. We have no idea what they're saying. They probably have no idea what they're saying. They don't have any methodology or structure. It's improvisation. Probably they're doing a lot of mistakes, giving free legal advisory, for example. And then after that, out of the box comes either they become a client, which is conversion, which is a good thing, or they don't. Most law firms are not measuring the success in terms of conversion from such meetings. Even less of them are systematically looking at actually what goes on. So that's why I call it the black box approach. If your legal practice is one of those guilty of making this mistake, my very strong recommendation would be to use a consultative selling methodology and to have all of your lawyers and partners understand what this is. What are the best practices? What is the structure of the consultation meant to be? So on a simple note, we could have small talk. Then we would have the open questions. We have the 4 types: the background questions, the bothering questions, the worst case scenario questions, and the value of solution questions. Then we would have maybe some cross-selling, trial closing and closing, wrap up, and then the follow-up. So if you wanted to avoid having a black box approach to your client consultations, it means that you should have some kind of template from a sales perspective of the different stages of that meeting. And it's totally appropriate to have that in written form in front of you to keep you on track. Again, how many law firms actually do this? I don't know. I don't think I've found any that are doing it. Or if they're doing it, they kept it a secret from me. So the idea here is black box approach is bad. A consultative selling systematic approach to client consultations would be good. If you're not clear about those 4 types of questions, again, go to the Nixedonia YouTube channel and you can see the broadcast, which was, so today is Thursday, the 11th of May, 2023. So if you find the broadcast of Thursday, 27th of April, then I go into a bit more detail about those type of questions. Now, if we're looking at consultative selling and we're looking at new client meetings, it goes without saying that a very big dirty secret in the legal services industry is that there is basically no preparation done most of the time before a new client meeting. So I would really strongly recommend that if you know that a prospect is coming, you need to do meeting preparation. You should look at them on LinkedIn. You should connect to them on LinkedIn. You should Google them. You should see on LinkedIn who are your common contacts. The world is very small. And if you would be able to name drop some common contacts that you've worked with together or that you studied with or that you know, then this will give you a lot of credibility. This would increase your chances of conversion. You could also look at their contacts on LinkedIn and identify which of them you don't actually know, but you jolly well would like to in future. And there is nothing wrong with planting that seed of an active referral, even at this very early stage of the first meeting with this potential client, and dropping that into the conversation and saying, hey, I see you're acquainted with Mr. ABC, the CEO of such and such a company. I really think we could be useful for them in this kind of area. Maybe that would be something we can come back to in future. So you can plant the seed of an active referral. And it also shows that you've done your homework. You know who they are, you know who they know, and you're showing that you know some similar people. So in terms of social equity, in terms of trust, in terms of endorsement, this is a very good thing to do. So meeting prep ahead of the prospect meeting before any consultative selling even takes place is a good idea. Again, if you're a very busy lawyer, very busy partner, why don't you delegate this research? You could delegate this to an admin assistant or one of the juniors. It doesn't have to all be on your shoulders. And then on the day, I think it's extremely important that when the prospect comes to your office and you're going to have this initial consultation with them, be there first. So this applies very much if you're going to do public speaking, if you're going to do training, if you're giving a presentation, if you're giving a client consultation, they need to be coming into the room where you are first. This means they're coming into your territory, and it gives you an advantage that you're there, calm, cool, and prepared, and that they're coming to you. So you should always be there first. It's a very bad idea if you have a delegation of potential clients, 3 or 4 people, and you put them in a meeting room, and then you come across running 5 minutes late, gosh, maybe 10 minutes late, flustered and confused. It puts you at a strategic disadvantage. It really does. And it doesn't make a good impression. So quite simply, be there first. From a sales and psychological perspective, this gives you quite a number of advantages. And, you know, perhaps you could even be there first. And I mean, be there at your office first. You could be the one who actually meets them. Sometimes I come to law firms because I'm meeting law firms basically every day. And how the first impression goes really very much differs from law firm to law firm. Here in Central and Eastern Europe, sometimes I come to an office and you have an absolutely awful person at security. That usually it might even be a security guard. I don't know who they are, some kind of shabby janitor or something. And then they take out some archaic book and they demand your passport, and they have to write in it, and they keep you waiting. And then I'm thinking, what is this? Is this the Soviet Union? And then they give a call, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this does not make a good impression at all. And they frown at you, and you come up, and then you come to some receptionist who also looks at you with, if not hatred, then perhaps with dislike. It's dreadful. You don't want to do that. This kind of impression from the security to the reception, it should be a good impression. So perhaps if you have one of these dreadful entrances, it's a bit expensive to change your office, why don't you go down there and you meet them at the start? You meet them and you smooth out the process. You're going to be there to greet them. You're going to be like a charming host or charming hostess. So you meet them, you smile, they are a very valuable guest that are coming to see you. You take them past that difficult environment at the start of the office and you bring them up into the office. Even better, why don't you give them a little guided tour? I remember when I was working at DLA Piper in St. Petersburg in Russia, our office was in Dom Zinger, the Zinger House on Nevsky Prospect, and it was a beautiful building. It was all marble and chandeliers and red velvet and gold, and it was a very impressive, beautiful building. And one of the things that our managing partner did with our valuable clients was she gave them a little guided tour. She walked them around the office, and while she was doing this, she would introduce them. This is the tax partner. They do these things in tax. This is the corporate department. These are real estate guys. Here we have competition and antitrust. So this was a kind of soft cross-selling, and it made the guest feel welcome. So again, the first impression matters. And oh my goodness, even if you don't have dreadful security and reception at your business center downstairs, do make sure that you give some training to your office manager, to your front office person. Sometimes I come to a law firm and the office manager stands up and they're smiling and they say, nice to meet you. And they take me to the room, they give me coffee, maybe they give me a cookie and they're lovely. And I can see that they probably had some customer service training, or maybe they're just very charming. Not all of the office managers and receptionists are like this. It would be worth, probably it is worth hundreds or thousands of euros. Give them some customer service training so that they understand maybe they should smile, maybe they should stand up, maybe they should speak to the person not like an irritation, but as a valued guest. So even before you have your consultation, I think these impressions are extremely important. Take a look at how a new client would perceive your office and the behavior when they come to see you guys. Now, when you come into the meeting, you should be taking notes. You should bring your notes, which means you've done some preparation. You should definitely be taking notes during the consultation itself. And you should have some kind of agenda, some kind of flow chart. In terms of, like, for example, the consultative selling, the different stages, small talk, the different questions, the cross-selling, you need to have this. I find it absolutely amazing and actually quite disrespectful when I come to a law firm and a lawyer or a partner meets me and they're empty-handed. They're not going to take any notes. And we have our half-hour conversation talking about whatever we talk about. Are they really going to remember all of that? Are they going to remember what are the next things to do and the next opportunities? That doesn't seem to make a good impression. And of course, it means they aren't listening and they forget or they don't care about most of the things we're talking about. So don't do that. You should take notes and you should bring notes. Your memory is very overloaded with different things to do. And because you're going to need to do follow-up after your consultative selling, then your notes are going to be extremely, extremely valuable. When you start the consultation, of course, you should do small talk. And one way to do this beyond the generic British style small talk of talking about the weather would be to play host. So ask them, is it the first time to your city, to your country? This is especially good if they're foreigners. Have they been to such and such a place? Where are they staying? What are their plans? Do they know many people here? You might get some actually valuable information through that kind of small talk as playing host. And of course, it's extremely important when you're doing your small talk that it's not generic, that you play host, and that you move beyond that to try and find nuggets. So the nugget, as the picture shows here, it shows some bars of gold. That's what it represents. A nugget is a small piece of gold. And what this means is that during your small talk, you're not just there to make pleasant conversation. You're trying to find points of commonality. You're trying to find points of similarity. So a nugget, that's what it exactly is. If you find you come from the same area, you studied at the same university, you know the same people, you have the same hobby. Any kind of nugget is a good thing. There are two levels to the small talk. You have the superficial small talk, which doesn't go very far, and it's just on the surface of the water, and you don't touch their soul. You want to use that, and by playing host, to get beyond that, down into finding the nuggets. The nuggets will find a closer bond between you and that prospect, and therefore increase your chances of conversion. Because we do know that when we're having client consultations, that there is the iceberg model of needs. And here we can see the expanded iceberg model of needs. When a client comes to your law firm, they might have urgent needs. For example, they're being sued and they're shouting and crying and screaming and raving. This is very, very important for them. It's a burning need. You must not fall for this. Do not immediately respond to urgent needs. You need to ask them different open questions. There are other explicit needs that they will be telling you about. Maybe they have the wrong idea. Maybe they think that that urgent need is the priority and the other explicit needs can be done later. They could be wrong. Maybe some of those explicit needs are the priority in reality, and you have to correct them. Even worse, you need to dig deeper. You need to ask open questions, because beyond the urgent and the explicit needs, there are plenty of implicit needs which they're not telling you about. Maybe they've forgotten about them. Maybe it just didn't occur to them. They don't see the connection between the matter at hand and these implicit needs. And beyond that, you could even encounter hidden needs. So I remember working with some white-collar criminal lawyers on numerous occasions, and they have a problem that their clients are not telling them all of the information because the client is embarrassed or shy or ashamed. They have hidden needs. So they don't want to tell the lawyer about it. Despite that, you cannot help them unless your client is going to be honest. So when you get a feeling that there are some hidden needs, you need to break them. You need to get through there, and you need to explain that your job is to help them. Your job is not to judge or to think about the rights or the wrongs. Your job is to give them the biggest assistance and defense possible legally. And that can only be done if you see these hidden needs. And then beyond that, at the bottom of the expanded iceberg model of needs, you have unknown needs. The client doesn't even know that there's an issue, so they can't ask you about it. So this is why it's very, very, very important when a potential client comes to your office, you don't make the classic mistake of simply asking, how can I help you? What can we help you with? What's the issue? Because then they will just tell you urgent needs, and it can be wrong. And you will miss the explicit needs, the implicit needs, the hidden needs, and unknown needs. Not only does that mean that you're doing a disservice to the client by immediately doing what you're told, you definitely shouldn't be doing that, but it also means that there's a lot of value and help that you're not giving them, and also much less money that you would be making if you actually had a more open-ended consultative selling approach, which means you ask them lots of open questions to identify all of these needs, and then you make your diagnosis about what you're going to be doing first. We saw before that the consultative selling approach has the 4 types of questions. We have the background questions to begin with. How are things going? What's your business like? How is life? That's okay. These are easy. Then we go to bothering questions. What seems to be the issues at hand? What are your concerns? What keeps you up at night? What are your frustrations? With the bothering questions, we want to find some kind of pain, something that we could help to make better. Beyond the bothering questions, once they told us about something that bothers them, we take that and we exaggerate it to the worst case scenario. We don't tell them, but we ask them. In the worst case scenario, how could this end? What would you do if it ends up in this situation? How will you react if this scenario comes to pass? Because by changing a bother, a concern, or a worry into a worst case scenario, which they themselves are telling you, it increases the need. So you're changing these hidden or implicit needs into explicit needs or even urgent needs. You're raising the need, and by raising the need, you're also significantly decreasing price sensitivity. Once you have taken them from bothering questions to worst case scenario questions, you don't tell them the solution, you ask them the value of a solution. So how much would you save if this could be resolved by next month? This means we know how to resolve it by next month, but we're not going to tell them. We're asking them how much they would save. And by them telling you the value of that, again, they're increasing their need and decreasing price sensitivity. This needs a little bit of practice and preparation. When I was at DLA Piper from 2008 until 2015, sometimes I would go to the different offices and spend 1 or 2, or even, can you imagine, 3 days practicing this. We would do the role plays, we would have the materials, we would try and create these quadruplets. And a quadruplet in consultative selling, the consultative quadruplets, means when we have created a scenario, let's say in employment law, where we can connect an employment law background question, link it to the expected bothering question, link that to the worst case scenario question, and link that to the value of solution question, then we have that nice consultative quadruplet ready. And my prediction is, quite often a number of the issues that you're going to encounter if you're an employment lawyer are going to be similar. So you should have in your head and prepared for the client consultations, perhaps, well, maybe to begin with, 6 example quadruplets, maybe more as you move forward. If you were going to be really super duper prepared, you would have legal products as the heart. And based on the legal product which you have, you then build an example quadruplet around it. So you begin by going backwards. You know, this is the legal product, which is going to be the solution. So you then create a value of solution question, and then you can connect it to the worst case scenario question, up to the bothering question, to background. So in terms of the formulation, you do it backwards. Again, most law firms don't have any legal products or solutions actually designed. And I think you could probably count on one hand the number that would take this kind of systematic consultative selling approach in order to persuade the client on that journey. So it's a very good idea to be prepared and create these example quadruplets. Probably you could do this by yourself. If you want to do it easier and quicker, then you might need somebody, an expert, who can help you with it. So if you're keen on my assistance with you for example quadruplets in consultative selling for your practice, email me, jjmcveigh@nixedonia.com, and I'm happy to speak to you about how we could do that. After you have done those example quadruplets, and after you have taken your client through the levels of changing the unknown needs or hidden needs or implicit needs into explicit needs through asking those 4 levels of question, that's the heart of the consultative selling, only then does it become possible to start talking about closing and trial closing. So basically pricing, about money. Closing is when you ask for a purchase decision. Will you buy? Shall we start on Monday? It's a good idea. You need to close at the end of your consultation. Most law firms and lawyers do no closing at all, and therefore they do not get a sale. To minimize your risk of objections or an unsuccessful close, you can do trial closing before that. Trial closing means when you test the water, you check if there are any objections. So a trial close is a question of opinion. A close is a question of decision. And you do trial close, trial close, trial close. And when there's no objections, then you close. So example of trial close questions would be, how would this solution fit your needs? What do you think of this as a scenario for cooperation? When would this be the more appropriate time to start? So you're asking these open questions, and if you encounter any difficulty or any kind of objections, then you deal with it. You talk about the advantages and benefits of whatever it is that you can offer, and then you do another trial close. So there are 3 levels of closing. The most common level of closing at the end of a consultative sale in law firms is not to do any closing at all. And so we say something silly like, let's email each other, or we look forward to hearing from you. That is plain dumb. Do not do that. If you're not even making an effort to close, your chances of getting a mandate will drop. Next level is to try and do a direct close. And you say something like, okay, would you prefer that we bill this as a fixed fee or by billable hours. So that would be an example of an XY close. You're not asking if we're going to work together, you're asking them how they're going to pay. So this could be seen as a little bit manipulative. Good. But if they have objections, that XY close wouldn't work. They say, no, I'm not convinced that you guys have the capability for this. Let us think about it. So you lost. So the third level of closing is trial close, trial close, trial close. And only then, when there's no objections, then you should close. I've written a paper. There's many different types of closing and trial closing. They come in many flavors. So I mentioned just, for example, now this XY close, but there are lots of different types of close. If you're interested in that, email me, jjmcveigh@nixedonia.com. I can share some information on it. And then, of course, it's extremely important that you're able to overcome objections. Sorry, just 1 second. Okay, sure. Yeah, okay. So I've just got to move to another room just now. When you reach the stage of closing and trial closing, it's almost inevitable that you will encounter some objections. And to be honest, guys, you don't need to be afraid of these. You need to be ready for them. You need to even look forward to them. We can genuinely predict that you will encounter sooner or later the price objection. Someone is going to say to you, wow, you guys are so expensive. How are you going to deal with that? You do not give a unilateral discount. You do not make a unilateral concession. You ask why. What are they comparing you against? You are clear about your value propositions. And if they really don't have budget, you change that discount that they were asking into a downsell. You change the scope of what you're offering. If you're going to encounter the other lawyer objection, they say, well, you know, we've been working with such and such a company and we're really happy with them. You know, you need to be able to say sweet words about that other law firm. Then you say but, because that's going to kill the sweet words. And then you're going to show your product UVP. What is the product or solution that you're able to offer, which gives you a competitive edge or could hook their attention compared to the other law firm? And the expertise objection. This one is actually easier for lawyers to overcome because we're pretty good at what we do. However, imagine you have great expertise in corporate law, and they are mentioning one of your direct competitors who also has great expertise in corporate law. How can you show that you're the stronger expert, that you have the better expertise than the other person? And moreover, be able to translate that into something which maybe only lawyers or the legalese people, the legalese language, into something which in plain English, so that the common man could understand. So towards the end of your consultation, after you have done your closing and trial closing, you need to be prepared in terms of common objections and how to overcome them. You would be surprised. Most law firms have never done any practice into this. Make a list of the objections, brainstorm, this is how we might, overcome them. This is how we might answer them. And remember that you're not a free resource. This is something crazy I see in Central and Eastern Europe. The lawyers, I think because lawyers just had no training in this, the lawyers think client comes, tells a problem, we tell a solution, we give advisory. And quite often clients don't even seem to realize that the advisory should cost money. It doesn't come for free. You're not there to give free advisory. You're not there to be helpful. You're not there for pro bono. You're there to be helpful enough and interesting enough that they engage you so that you can really help them. And the only way that you can really help them is by asking all of these different questions, building the relationship and understanding a greater scope and depth of their needs and the situation at hand. That is not going to happen in any free 30-minute consultation. So you're not there to give free advisory, you're there to interview them. You need to change your mentality as a lawyer about what's actually going on here. You're interviewing them. It's not them interviewing you. It's not about you trying to prove that you're good enough smart enough to work for them. It's you're interviewing them so that you can get a grasp on the issue, and then that you're going to decide as the expert, is this something that you could or should help them with? Again, the shift in mentality needs to be made. And in many countries, there's a lot of space until that shift in mentality from free advisory to interviewing prospects actually kind of takes place. In terms of talking about the pricing, you can desensitize them to pricing. So I've talked about this. I've written this in my book, Upselling and Raising Prices. I've written this in my other book about legal services pricing. But you need to be prepared to desensitize them to pricing. Talk about different price models. Can you really offer alternative pricing approaches? Most law firms are not very organized about this. If you're going to do fixed fee, make sure, oh my goodness, make sure it's not just using the intuitive crystal ball, that just based on how we feel today and we put our finger to the wind, that's how much we're going to price. So if a partner had lunch, he would ask for a higher rate than if he's hungry, they may ask for a lower rate. That's kind of silly. So whatever you do, move away from intuitive pricing. Again, if you want to look at all the different pricing models and approaches, McVeigh at Nixedonia.com. A nice thing that you can do is to do a war story, to say that you dealt with a similar issue and it came to this sum, and you mentioned the sum, and then you reassure them that this case is not so complex and it's going to be this sum. Simply by mentioning the first sum, which is larger, this will benchmark them against it so that your second sum, which you're predicting for them, is going to be relatively cheap. So you always need to do a comparative benchmark. You always need to upsell. You always should be giving maybe 2, if not 3, even more price options. And you're not doing any, no free discounts. You should even be doing markups. But we've talked about that. We've talked about that before. After you've done that, the next part is absolutely the end of your consultative sale. You do a summary and you do the CTAs. You tell them what to do. The outcome that you have to avoid, you really, really, really have to avoid in any of these meetings, whether you initiated it or if they came to you, you don't want to have a meet and greet. You meet them, you greet them, they walk out and nothing further happens. It's a waste of your time. You don't have a lot of time to waste. So you definitely summarize what's going on. That helps you to make sure that you understood the issues and the next steps. And you clarify the CTAs, the calls to action. Not only is it one-sided, what's on your side to do, the email to send, the information to send, the question to ask, also you tell them what to do. This is extremely important because by giving them a CTA, something to do, you see how quickly they do it. You see how serious they are. This is the type of qualification. If they're going to be very tardy and irresponsive in dealing with this very first call to action from you, question if you want to work with them. And again, I think this goes overall for the consultative selling. If you get bad vibes, if you get a feeling that maybe this prospect or client isn't good to work with, listen to yourself. Don't work with them. You're probably right. It's entirely possible for you to do a lot of legal advisory and then not getting paid for it. So you don't want that to happen. If they have had the experience of working with other legal advisors, of course, you're not going to do black PR. And of course, you're not going to say bad things about other law firms or lawyers. But it would be an extremely silly thing to do not to ask questions on the previous legal advisory. How were they? What did you like about the service? If they're coming to you, why are you coming to us? You can ask these questions. It's good for you to know what they were not dissatisfied about. If they've decided to change their legal provider, was it because of responsiveness? Was it because of pricing? Was it because of complexity? Be honest with yourself. If they say, oh, we were working with your competitor company ABC, and we want to change them because they're not as responsive as we like, are you really more responsive than ABC? My accusation to you would be, you are not. Unless you have a business model, UVP, unless you have a real competitive edge in terms of responsiveness, some kind of system which allows you to be more responsive than the competitors, then your empty promises that we will be more responsive, we'll respond as quickly as possible, we're super responsive, that's not going to work. And you're probably going to get hit with the same problem as happened to your competitor. So don't make empty promises. And if you are going to make promises about how you can be better in terms of whatever they were not satisfied about, make sure it's tangibly supported, because otherwise it's not going to lead anywhere. A nice thing to do towards the end of your client consultation would be to share an infographic. And you could have this as a placemat where you show that you have these other practices. We have real estate, we have corporate, we have competition, we have antitrust. And most law firms would leave it at that. No. Show them a scenario. So in the event that you're going to do a cross-border transaction, these guys can help you with the competition antitrust aspects and the certification. If your company grows nicely, you'll find that your current structure isn't ideal. And these tax colleagues, they can show you tax optimization for when you get beyond a headcount of such and such. So most law firms don't even bother to mention other practices. Most law firms do not do any proactive cross-selling at all. You should. And towards this stage of the meeting, you should. And a nice way to do this is not simply to say that we have these people who do these weird and wonderful things, which the client might not understand. Tie those to predictable scenarios that could be of interest to the client and show a contact name. Now, if you wanted to do this really smart, not only would you show the contact name and have the little photograph of your colleague, that's very important, but you would even then drive this to get a meeting. So you drive this, you talk about it, and you say, hey, how about we have a tea for 3 next week? You, me, and this person. That would be a metric of success. Your metric of success from this meeting overall is not simply converting this meeting into a mandate for yourself, which is wonderful. If you are a super salesperson, you would also get follow-up meeting or meetings. It's entirely possible that you meet a CEO of a very large company and you could get potentially 2 or 3 or more different other meetings for other practice colleagues in your firm. Again, almost nobody is doing this. But you could. If you're watching the Nixedonia early morning show, then you perhaps have a motivation to reach that level of achievement. And my advice about the follow-up after the meeting is immediate follow-up. I don't mean within 24 hours. I mean immediate. I mean within a few minutes. You shake their hand, you see them out, they leave, you go straight to your computer and you do the follow-up immediately. There is a very silly number of meetings that could have converted into mandates that are lost simply by responding after 1 or 2 or 3 days. You leave it too late, the client cools down, they change their mind. Also, the amount of time that you're going to need to spend doing a good follow-up will increase day by day because you're going to forget and you're going to have to research and you're going to have to look at your notes. Hopefully you took notes. Yeah? So no, immediate follow-up within minutes. And this doesn't look desperate. This looks that you're very responsive. And in your follow-up, you should have your calls to action. You tell them what to do and threaten, or shall we say promise, warm calls. If they don't respond by such and such a time, you're going to do a warm call and you're not bluffing. Your follow-up is to drive that meeting to a mandate. You do not want this to be a meet and greet. So you're not just going to send a follow-up email and then sit and wait and see what happens. You're going to have a follow-up procedure. Your email and a warm call, maybe another email, maybe a later phone call, even to the degree of nuclear option. And again, if you're not sure what that means, degree of nuclear option, then that's from my topic, sales writing. You can find it on the YouTube videos or email me and I'll tell you. And I think the last point for today would be, for goodness sake, show genuine curiosity. I am amazed how many times I go into client meetings with lawyers and the lawyer seems stressed, disinterested, apathetic, formalistic. No, you need to be the curious cat. Think for yourself, why is this interesting? What can I learn from this? What would be the cool questions to ask? If you can inspire yourself and ask yourself these questions. You're selling to yourself the interest and viability and value of this client, and this will be reflected. I think this is sometimes why younger lawyers, they can have higher conversion with small to medium-sized business owners from client meetings than older lawyers. Older lawyers come across as being a little bit distant and disinterested because they're seen too much and they're jaded. And the younger lawyers have that. They have that childish enthusiasm, that curiosity. They're not afraid to ask the silly questions. And some of the questions, it turns out, are not actually that silly. So have genuine curiosity. The client or the potential client will pick up on if you're being genuine and if you care. And if you don't, then that's not good. So be a curious cat. So I think on that point, we're going to wrap up for today. Again, I went a little bit over time. I've dropped a few mentions about things that we could do together or things I could see you, send to you. If that's interesting, jjmcveigh@nixedonia.com. And let me take the opportunity to tell you that later this year, from the month of June to November, I'm going to be doing free live streams, one per month, based on my book, The 36 Rules of Legal Writing. These are going to be from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock Central European Time on the last Thursday of June, July, August, September, October, and November. And they're an hour. It's going to be me presenting 6 of the very important rules for good legal writing. And this is a kind of hybrid approach because some of the other law firms and lawyers, they will do this as the theoretical part, and then they see me in person for the exercises and the practical part. So if you're interested in more information about the upcoming half-dozen legal writing sessions, drop me a line and I can tell you more. And in any case, you're very welcome to attend those, and they will be on the YouTube channel as well. Okay, so I think at that point, let's wrap up for today. And I hope it was interesting for you. And I'll see you next Thursday when we're going to look at Consultative Selling Part 4, the final episode regarding our adventures in consultative selling. Okay, thank you very much.